I'm starting out with a piece of maple. It's 8.5 inches long and 5 by 5. So I went ahead and marked centers and got it mounted in between the centers on the lathe. And I'm going to true it up with a spindle gouge. So I did one of these about a month or so ago, and I learned quite a few things, so I wanted to do another one with a nice solid piece of wood. Just went through and got it all true with the spindle gouge, and then we'll start shaping it. After I got it all true, I went ahead and put a tenon down on one end of it so that we can grab it in the chuck. Now that we have it remounted, I'm going to go ahead and start shaping it. Again, just using the spindle gouge. Lathe speed's about 2,000. It was right around there when I started out too. So this is the top of the urn up here. So just kind of brought it around and made a lip on it. I'll explain the size of the lip here in just a minute once we get into that point. That was one of the things I learned. It was, you can make larger ones or smaller ones, but one that is in the middle, you're going to have a hard time remounting that in the chuck. So the jaws on the chuck that I have on there are, when they're closed, they're right about 3 inches. So I need to make the recess in here 3 inches. If you make it smaller and have to drop down to a smaller set of jaws, the lip is going to hit. It won't go, the chuck won't go inside of that groove. I just got lucky on the one I did last month and everything fit. But after looking at it and doing that last one, I realized it has to go down inside there, so the lip there goes around your chuck, or you can use the longer nose jaws and make a smaller one, and then they will go inside of it. But making a smaller tenon with something this big, you probably wouldn't be able to hold on to it well enough to hollow it out. So I went with this one. I got it all sanded. I ran through all the grits dry up to 600. And we'll go ahead and flip it around in the chuck. So you can kind of see when I'm putting it on here, it just goes right inside of there and doesn't come down and hit the chuck. But you just need to keep that in mind if you're going to make one of these. Just kind of measure everything. So I'm going to take the foot down here, and I'm not going to bring it all the way down. Just I'm going to leave a little bit of material on there, and then we'll use a parting tool to part off the bottom of it. But just bringing down the part that's on the main body of it, and I'll put a couple of beads on it, and then we'll work on the foot of it here in a second. So this is the outside of the ring, so I'm using the 2.5 inch rings, and I'm just going to make a recess for those, and then we'll start hollowing this thing out. So just take your time when you're fitting the rings. You don't want them too loose, but you are going to put a little bit of epoxy in there, so it's not that critical, but you don't want them flopping around in there. So just bringing down that center spot, and then we will use a Forstner bit to get the majority of the material out and go right down to the top of it, so I know right where the bottom is. Just put a little dimple in there for the Forstner bit to go in. And this Forstner bit, it's going to depend on what size you're making, or if you're not even using the ring, that it could be just about any size, but I believe this one's about 2 inches. So if you are doing something like this and you want to use a Forstner bit, if you get one that's a little bit bigger than the actual chuck, it's nice because that can go all the way inside and you don't have to put an extension on it. Then I switched over to the number 1 hollower and cleaned the whole thing out with this one tool. Like I was saying in the last one I did, it's actually much easier to do the hollowing from the bottom. And then went ahead and sanded it. So this is another thing that I'm going to change when I do another one. I'm sure I'll do another one in the future. So I put the beads on it right now, and then we're going to work on the foot. But on the next one, I'm going to finish the foot and glue the rings in both sides, screw it together, and then do this part right there. It was a little bit time consuming, measuring everything, rechecking it, calipers to get it exact. And if I could just screw the foot on and finish it all at the same time, put the beads on it, it would be easier. So on this part, on the lid, we're going to make a tenon, and so the tenon goes on the inside of the rings on this one. So, and this part right here is just what's going on the inside. So I just took a couple passes across it and cleaned it up a little bit. And then we'll flip it around and use that tenon. I'm going to change the jaws, use that tenon to grab a hold of it, and then we'll finish off the bottom of it. So I put 2 beads on the body of it, and then I'll put 1 more bead on this. And like I said, on the next one, I will just screw it together and do them all at once. So I measured the diameter with the calipers, and because it's on the inside there, I kept turning the lathe on and off and, and making sure it was right. So yeah, I think it would just go smoother if it was together. And because you have that recess in the top, you can remount this thing anytime you want, and I think it would work out well. After I got the bead done, I grabbed the parting tool and then brought down the underneath it just a little bit with the parting tool and cleaned that up. And then we'll switch back over to the number 1 hollower and get that foot all cleaned off and get it cupped out. And again with this, I just ran through all the grits up to 600 dry. I have to put epoxy in all of it, so I wanted to wait till the end to put the oil on. I used a 5-minute epoxy and just mixed it up with a popsicle stick and put a little bit around the lip of it there, around the outside of the ring. Got a little bit too much on right there. It's all good. So I just put it on a few spots, placed it down in there, and then just reached in there and spun the ring around a little bit so that it coated the whole way around. And then for the lid, I screwed the inner one down inside of it. So this tenon is going on the inside of that. So I just put a little bit of epoxy on the tenon and then just pressed it right on and let it set up. I let that in the first one, the one on the body, I let that set up for probably 10 minutes or so before I did this part right here. And then we'll get some walnut oil put on it. So this is Doctor's walnut oil, and I just soaked the whole thing down and wiped it off with a paper towel. It's a beautiful piece of maple. There we go. I have my expiration date. There we go, it's all done. Again, it's out of maple, just got some beautiful character in it. It's 7.5 inches tall and 4.5 inches in diameter. So turning urns like this, I think, is a great way to do it. It's actually easier to hollow them out. As far as going in the other way, coming around here, making sure this is all even, and coming around the shoulder there, it's going in from the bottom, straight in all the way, and just wrap around that corner right there. So it's it kind of simplifies that process, and you can actually do these ahead of time and then leave the top open and put an insert in it to personalize it. So I think it's a great way to do it. Like I said in the video, so this right here, make sure you don't make that lip too tall to where it doesn't, you know, if this was smaller, it wouldn't fit around the outside of the chuck. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you were making smaller ones, like small keepsake urns, obviously you could use the long nose jaws, and that would really simplify that part of it a little bit easier. But hollowing something out this big with those long nose jaws, it probably would have popped out of the chuck if I was trying to hollow the whole thing out. Yeah, and the other thing was too, I'm going to screw it together and do this part. It's all even, but it took me quite a while, calipers, measuring it. I took it off the lathe a couple times, put it on there to make sure it was right. So it's just glue the inserts in, screw it together, and then put it back on the chuck. And what's nice about this too is if you made these up and it needed the finish touched up on it, you can put it right back in the jaws and clean it up. So I just went over to the laser, carved that out. I used the calipers, measured the top there, and it fits right in. A little bit of wood glue on that, pop the insert in, and you are done. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Everybody take care, have a good weekend, and we will see you next time.